Hi everyone. Wanted to introduce you to this gentleman. His name is Sundar Singh, Sadhu Sundar Singh. He lived from 1889 to 1929. I'm going to read you just a little bit from the back. This book is the actual writings of this gentleman, like words from him, a collection of them. He wasn't one for writing books, so. But I'm just going to read you on the back some of the recommendations for this book. Sadhu Sundar Singh's dramatic encounter with the living Christ, his refusal to clothe his faith with Western trappings, and his absolute devotion to the way of Jesus make for compelling reading. I highly recommend this book. And that was a comment from Richard J. Foster, who wrote a book called Prayer that you might be familiar with. Then the Library Journal says this about Singh. Little known today, Singh was perhaps the best known Indian mystic of the first half of the 20th century. Well versed in Hindu, Islamic and Sikh writings, Singh lived as a wandering holy man in the established Hindu manner, but found his way to a kind of Christianity based in his own mystical experience of Jesus. This fascinating collection of his conversations and parables reveals a startling, non-Western but deeply authentic Christianity. In the introduction of the book, it also gives you a little bit of his history, his background. It says, Sundar Singh was born on September 3rd, 1889, in Rampur, a village in the Punjab, into a well-to-do Sikh family. Educated at a nearby Presbyterian mission school, he abhorred the colonial religion of his teachers until a deep mystical encounter with Jesus changed him and left him seeking to follow him. He was baptized in Simla on his 16th birthday. 33 days after this, he took on the ascetic lifestyle of a sadhu, a wandering holy man. Sundar Singh's significance does not lie in place names and dates, however, but rather in the devotion and selflessness with which he spread the gospel, and in the sincerity with which he lived what he preached. As German scholar Friedrich Heiler once put it, he is India's ideal of the disciple of Christ, a barefooted itinerant preacher with burning love in his heart. In him, Christianity and Hinduism meet, and the former stands forth, not as something foreign, but like a flower with blossoms on an Indian stem. As a Christian witness, he was both welcomed and persecuted. Thousands were struck by the simplicity of his faith. Yet by many missionaries and even Indian Christian leaders, he was considered a highly eccentric convert, completely out of step with contemporary Christianity, as he wandered the roads in his yellow robe and turban. Yet even though he never heard the later buzzwords contextualization and indigenization, he did more than anyone in the first half of the 20th century to establish that true Christianity was not an imported, alien, foreign religion, but compatible with Indian needs, aspirations, and faith. He lived to introduce his own people to the Christ of the Indian Road. And in reading this book, what struck me is when you hear some of his conversations with people, the questions that they ask him, and then his answers, I was really struck by how common people's questions are. It doesn't really matter what culture they're in. They generally have very similar questions about faith. And the other part that really struck me in reading about Singh was the fact that he highlights a problem or a mistake that is often made by Christians, and has certainly something that missionaries had to learn and did learn, was that when you're presenting the gospel, you have to be careful you're just presenting Christ and you're not presenting your culture along with it, especially to people of a different culture. What you want them to know is the person of Christ, not the way you do things, your methods, and tying those to the Christian message. So this really struck me in reading his comments. It also reminds me very much of the statement that the Apostle Paul made about what he did when he was trying to reach people, and especially when he was trying to reach people who did not have his background, did not have similar belief structure or ideas and faith experience. This is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 20 to 22. To the Jews I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. This kind of method that the Apostle Paul used, and I would say that Sundar Singh uses, is going to be misunderstood. Oftentimes by fellow believers, you're going to be misunderstood and criticized for not being orthodox enough for their liking. But oftentimes it's more of an attachment to your own culture. I'm going to link to a video we did. It was a Ray Franz video. We entitled it JW's Fact Check. How many Muslims, Chinese, Indians not reached? And we're specifically talking about the method of door-to-door evangelism that the witnesses use. And the second one is Michael Green. Why church is burgeoning in East Asia. So that's an interesting video on the methodology in East Asia for reaching people. The next time we're going to talk about what was the key factor to Singh's receptiveness to Christian faith.